Welcome back to this EPA Forum on Food Waste. And we're into our third session where we're really focusing on reporting and implementation and possibly mandatory reporting and reductions on food waste coming down the tracks from mainly European legislation. And we've a couple of speakers overseas who are going to join us and tell us about the situations in their countries. And they are Ingrid, who we're going to hear from first. And after that, Sirje, Stén from the Finnish Ministry of Environment. And we also have Quirke here from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications as well, to give us the Irish perspective on perhaps mandatory reductions in reporting coming down the tracks. But first of all, we'll go to you, Ingrid, and to talk mostly about what the EU directive on corporate sustainability reporting involves, when it's likely to come in, and what impact it will have.
Great. Thank you so much. Just wondering if you see my screen or if the slides are up.
Yeah, no, I think that's okay.
Great. So, and I have 10 minutes and we can talk days about this. So I'm going to really make it quickly, but delighted to be here and unfortunately couldn't be there with you. So, what we are trying to do is make sure we reduce our negative impact on the environment. And this is a photo of my co-founder, son, who said, will the planet still be okay when I'm your age, Dad? So that's what we're trying to achieve. So Ireland is small but mighty. And I come from Belgium origin myself. 27 years later, I'm in Ireland, loving Ireland. And I believe once we put our mind to it, we can do it. We're agile, we can do anything, but we need to make sure we all work together. And everybody in the supply chain, in the food chain, from producers to consumers, need to play a role in preventing food waste. Now, sustainability comes to us in different forms, but ultimately it's a business transformation and it's a challenge, but I would want to focus on it's also an opportunity. Ireland is committed to reducing its food waste by 50% by 2030, in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we heard today already a lot about the plan. And while we're an island of partners and collaborators. So we need to understand what's happening in the world with our competitors, with our environment, with our customers and suppliers, because ultimately that is now part of our reporting scope. And I'll quickly go through that in a minute. So we come from a world where the Sustainable Development Goals are well understood, and the Food Waste Charter and Food Prevention Programme is mapped to the SDG 12.3. That is all clear. Now, the problem with the Sustainable Development Goals is that they are not binding. They are vastly underfunded and they're too vague for us to make changes. So for the last 20 odd years, they've been in front of all our minds, but ultimately we are running behind our targets and we cannot afford to run behind our targets. And Europe is addressing this by mandating sustainability directives. They developed the EU Green Deal and have approved EU directives to actually force companies to act and report in a sustainable way. And what do I mean with that? And here you see, for today's structure, our conversation, a structure in relation to their main focus. So we have CSRD on the one hand, and you will see in yellow the reporting transparency directives. In the blue or soft gray is the due diligence obligations. But today we're going to focus a little bit more around the CSRD, because the CSRD is actually developed to provide a holistic point of view for companies on their environmental impact, also their social impact, and it is to eliminate greenwashing. Europe is saying we have to get a standardized and benchmarked way to report transparency around our sustainability practices. So there's two main directives that they have developed. One is the EU taxonomy, The EU taxonomy is a classification system and a way to measure and improve the green assets of an organization. And it's through a ratio where economic activities in a company are being measured, assessed to be improved. The other one, however, we're going to watch a little bit closer today is the ESRS. And the ESRS is a set of 12 standards. I'll just go on to the next slide. I don't know if, the CSRD. The CSRD is actually the EU standard that is highlighting the 12 ways of reporting. And these are 12 standards, and some of them have to be reported by all, so ESRS 1 and ESRS 2, and others are dependent on their double materiality assessment. So once you have gone through an exercise of what is important to your organization, then the EU has called out there are data points and there are explanations that you need to provide, you need to share with us, and they need to be externally validated. The one main element here of this slide I want to draw your attention to is that there's a value chain accountability. So it's not only reporting around what is important to your operation, it's also from your suppliers and to your customers. Really, really important, because this is an extended scope. So now we need to report on what is important to our customers and our suppliers. And here you will see the structure of the sustainable, the 12 standards, where ESRS 1 calls out the general requirement, ESRS 2, the general disclosures, and underneath then you will see the E pillar, the S pillar, and the G. I'm not going to stay too long here. If anybody wants to further engage with me on that, happy to do so, but there is in total 1100 odd data points that if all these topics are important to you, then you need to report on it going forward. So moving on to the next slide. I hope it doesn't seem to be working. Apologies. Yes. So what are the key standards for the food and drink? And again, while all topics are important, they're not all equally important, and that's what the double materiality assessment will outline to you. There's 7 topical standards that I want to draw your attention to. The E1 climate change, it has everything to do with your energy and your carbon usage, not only in your organization, also with your suppliers. The pollution, obviously, is the use of agrochemicals quantified, your water resources, how you impact, or your suppliers, how they impact biodiversity. Waste, this is obviously the most important one for today's conversation. How do you engage with measuring and improving your waste along the value chain workers and affected communities as well? There's other directives coming down the track to make sure that we can get down to that reduction target. And we're all in this together. And that's what I want to say on the next slide. How do we do this? The core problem of our value chains, and especially in reporting, is how do we get to the data across our value chain? How do we get it from our suppliers? How do we get it from our customers or to our customers? And data becomes key. But what also is very, very evident in what the directives are saying is we need to all start collaborating. We need to be transparent around our value chain and the waste across our links. We need to start measuring and reporting and reducing, because ultimately we're actually all customers or suppliers of each other in our chain. So irrespective if you need to comply with this CSRD requirement, it will come to you in one way, shape, or form, either through a tender that you're now a supplier to a company and they will ask you what's your sustainable plan, what are you going to do on waste, or from your or from your customer's perspective. So ultimately, the EU also is trying to make it real for SMEs and has developed and is developing, and actually only yesterday a revised draft came out from the voluntary reporting. These are only 42 disclosures for smaller organizations to already get them started on what they need to report on. Because ultimately, and that's what I want to end up with, and I hope I'm not too late, there's 6 steps you can start doing today, and we all need to do this together. So across your value chain, we all need to do this together. Assess what is important to you and what is impactful to the growth of your business. So do this with a double materiality assessment. In that way, you're aligned with the CSRD. Assess your policies, your processes, your action plans, your metrics. So do a gap analysis and get a readiness analysis done so that you can develop a sustainable data and collaboration strategy to then also include what is the environmental impact that I have across my value chain. Also, what are my human rights impacts that I have across my value chain? To then focus around, now, what are the initiatives that I can put in place? What are the projects that we need to start engaging internally in our business or with our value chain to then start measuring and reporting? And that's the transparency that Europe is trying to get to, so that ultimately we are all reducing our target, and we're all getting to a safe and just environment and communities. So what I want to leave you with is, what is your own food waste journey today? Do you know where you are? Do you know where you want to be? We know we have the target. So how are you going to do that today with your own organization, with your suppliers, and for your customers? It is an inconvenience that is going to initially get you going, but the fear of what's next should drive us to actually look at the competitive advantage that it can give us. So ultimately, what we do is we help companies on the way, but my final question is, what change will you make today? And as a result of today's presentation from the EPA towards food waste prevention, I want to just make sure that we don't forget about the bigger picture. Food waste is so important, but it can all sit together in the reporting requirement that the EU is calling out today. So with that, thank you so much, and I'm happy to take any questions later on.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. That's absolutely fascinating, and something definitely we need to start preparing ourselves from, and businesses need to start preparing themselves for if they're not doing it already. Next, we're going to hear from Finland. And we have Sirje Stén on the line, and Sirje is going to tell us about what they did in Finland, which is quite a different approach to here. They had obviously voluntary targets and aspirations and pledges, but they brought in a mandatory food waste reporting now. So Sirje, welcome, and please tell us about what's happened in Finland.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Can I? Oh, no, sorry. So in Finland, we have been working a long time to reduce food waste, and we have measured the amount of food waste since 2018. But now we have a new legislation, and my title is Mandatory Food Waste Reporting in Finland. So to shift from voluntary to mandatory reporting. First, I have to tell you that in Finland we don't have the mandatory reporting yet, or only for a few operators. But we have some instruments in legislation that is easier to notify the mandatory reporting if we want it later, or if politicians want. So I'm sorry, I'm not. My English is not so fluent as Ingrid's, but I try my best. So my presentation is mostly I will tell you about the provisions of the new Waste Act adopted 2021. And but I'm not telling only about reporting of food waste and food-based records, but also a little bit about donations and so on. And then I show you some links to materials which are mostly in Finnish, but maybe today the Google Translate it's quite good, so you can see. But we have some English materials also. So we have a new order in waste decree. So in order to reduce food waste, operators must deliver unused food for redistribution, primarily for human consumption, when this can be done without compromising food safety and at reasonable cost. So we hope that this section will play a role in reducing food waste. But unfortunately, we don't have yet time or money to monitor this. So we don't know how the shops and restaurants and cafes have done with this. But we hope this will be better way to have donations in operators to the social workers. So, sorry. No. So then to the records keeping. We have in our Waste Act, there is a regulation about record keeping. So food business operators, for example, supermarkets, restaurant, food industry, and cafes, and so on, are obligated to keep records for food waste generated in their operations and its treatment. So the purpose of these records is to help operators to pay attention to the quantity of food waste generated in their operations and to find means to reduce food waste. The records must be presented to the supervisory authority upon request. Only the big operators, those who had environmental permits and or notifications, they have to submit the data or report the data to the supervisory authority annually as part of the other reporting of waste. And we have a data system for that. So the records must include the following information. So the quantity of waste generated in kilograms, the type of waste that the food waste is mainly composed of. As far as possible, the entries for the types of waste in accordance with the list of wastes. So, and then also the details of the waste operator and method of treatment. And where that's possible, the record data shall also contain an estimate of the total quantity of edible food discharged as waste. So you know that the directive is the food waste, the waste directive. The food waste means there that there is also the edible part and then the peels and bones and so on. Then we have also have in Food Act the new regulation about supervising, because it's more efficient that supervisors under Food Act also check the records of waste when they are visiting restaurants and cafes and shops. So the supervisory authority under the Food Act can provide official assistance for the control of food waste record to the authority under Waste Act. Because in Finland, waste authorities are mainly supervising large operators, such as food industry plants, while supervisory authorities under Food Act supervise also all restaurants, cafes, and supermarkets. So this cooperation made this supervising efficient and also help to monitor the food waste records of all kinds of actors and at the same time providing information on reducing food waste. Oh, so, and then finally, I tell you some links to our legislation. So our legislation is also in English, so you can read there. And then we have made some guide to operators and food waste on food waste records, only Finnish, sorry. But then we have quick guide to operators of food waste records also in English, because in restaurants and cafes there is more English speaking personnel. So then we have Food Act, only Finnish and Swedish, guide for official assistance also to the supervisory authority, and then also roadmap for food waste reducing. So, and then last, there we have made a film for cafes, restaurants, and shops. So how they have to keep the record and how the sorting should be organized. So you can see there, it's only Finnish, but you can see the film. Maybe you understand also without the language. So thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Sirje. Thank you for calling in from Finland and making yourself available and taking us through those mandatory reporting mechanisms that you have there at the moment. And obviously, we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Just our last speaker from this session before we delve into their presentations is Brian Quirke from the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications. And he's going to give us a snapshot of where we are in Ireland on the implementation of the food waste prevention roadmap, which is our plan in this country of how to reduce food waste and meet our targets. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today to give you an update on the implementation of the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap 2023 to 2025. So the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap, just a little bit of context, it was established to bring actions to tackle food waste across the food supply chain in a coherent manner and to steer Ireland's efforts towards the goal of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. So in 2020, the government published a waste action plan for a circular economy, which has a dedicated chapter on food waste and measures to tackle food waste, and one of the actions was to develop a food waste prevention roadmap, and also the climate action plans have commitments around reducing food waste. The agri-food strategy, Food Vision 2030, also has a commitment to develop a food waste prevention roadmap. So that gives you the context in terms of the commitment to develop the roadmap, and a lot of work was then subsequently carried out to prepare a roadmap in consultation with stakeholders, which included a public consultation in 2022, and that then culminated in the launch of the Food Waste Prevention Roadmap last November by Minister Smith and Minister McConaughey. So to give you some information around the delivery and implementation of the roadmap, the roadmap is very much focused on all sectors playing a key role in delivery of action to tackle food waste. From an administrative point of view and at a government and a state level, the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications is the lead government department in developing Ireland's National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap and in its coordination and review of its implementation. The Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine is the lead government department for the UN SDG 12.3 goal. And both departments are committed to working together to contribute effectively to the implementation of the roadmap. And as we've learned today, the Environmental Protection Agency plays a key operational role in driving implementation of key actions in the roadmap. And that's through its role in delivering the National Food Waste Prevention Programme and also annual reporting on national food waste statistics. So just some further context on what's included in the roadmap. So it's really focusing on all sectors of the food supply chain, and they are presented in the roadmap, and it's aligned with how the data is reported to the EU, which has been mentioned today in terms of from primary production, manufacturing, processing, retail distribution, restaurants and food services, and also the household sector as well. The roadmap sets how we'll establish a national baseline data on food waste from which we'll achieve the 50% reduction by 2030. Also an approach to interim milestones and targets on the way to that 2030 target. And this is very much linked to the work that's going on at EU level in terms of setting binding legal targets for food waste reduction across the EU. So we're very much watching that space in terms of the legislative proposal that was mentioned earlier on. And the roadmap focuses on food waste measurement and reporting, I suppose at the national level in terms of establishing the methodologies around reporting food waste data to the EU as per mandatory requirements, and which the EPA has a key role in delivering that function. Again, this is, due to the complexity of the food supply chain, there's really a focus on the commitment for all sectors to work together and to enhance food waste measurement. And I know food waste measurement is a common theme in today's forum, but also, that's very important, particularly the work that the EPA are doing in terms of establishing the protocol for measuring food waste, for example, for the manufacturing processing sector, and also the pathway to less food, and also other guidance for specific sectors that are being developed, and they are really key to help sectors identify the issues and measure food waste. Also, there's a focus on, sorry, just click here. Try this again. Yeah, to food waste segregation. Food waste segregation is an important element in terms of a step towards food waste prevention, particularly in the commercial and household areas. We do need to see better segregation and proper management of food waste that does arise, and ensuring it goes to the proper bin, and that in itself generates awareness around the behaviours that generate food waste in the first instance. Food donation and redistribution, a hugely important area for tackling food waste, particularly in redistributing surplus food to destinations where particularly where food is needed. Also, the role of research and innovation to identify areas where gaps in data around food waste, and also trying to look at developing solutions such as technology solutions around tackling food waste. Green public procurement is another key area of focus in the roadmap, particularly around the opportunities that the public sector has itself in stimulating the marketplace to put in measures to tackle food waste prevention as part of their service provision. And also a hugely important area, as we all know, is education, communications and awareness. And I think food waste is one of those issues that education and awareness will always be needed. And then finally, how we establish a monitoring and evaluation framework to check the progress of key activities, and then update the roadmap accordingly. And just to point out as well, last year the Circular Economy and Miscellaneous Provisions Act was established, and that provides a statutory basis as well for preventing a national food waste prevention strategies. So we expect that the next version of the roadmap will be on a statutory footing. It will be updated at least once every 3 years. So in terms of action, so it's very much an actions-focused roadmap as well, and there are 38 actions in the roadmap across 9 key theme areas, some of which I've covered already, from regulatory, food waste measurement, the charter, donation, segregation, comms, communications, education awareness, research and innovation, green public procurement, and also the monitoring of the implementation of the roadmap. So just some key developments. We're nearly at the end of the first year of this first roadmap period, and just to bring the slide further on again. Sorry, it's gone. Yeah. So some I suppose key highlights I want to bring to your attention, since the roadmap was launched in November last year. So we've established a food waste prevention task force, and the core membership of that task force includes representation from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, the Environment Protection Agency, and obviously as the lead in developing the roadmap is the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications. There is a focus in the roadmap on looking at the developments at EU level around the binding targets, around food waste reduction targets, and I won't go into too much detail because I know it's been covered already today, but the European Commission legislative proposal was published on the 5th of July, and that sets out proposed specific targets around the key stages of the supply chain, and also a review of those targets at the end of 2027, and looking at 2020 as the baseline year for which the targets are linked to. We'll be very much closely watching developments on that. In terms of the proposal, it will be subject to negotiation with the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. Food waste data has been reported by the EPA and the second year this has happened. So we've seen the 2021 data being reported to Eurostat. There has been new legislation to introduce incentivised charging for waste collection in the commercial sector. So since the 1st of July, there's been an obligation on waste collectors to provide all commercial customers with a mixed dry recycling bin, bio-waste and residual waste bin, and to charge fees which incentivises waste segregation as customer contracts come up for renewal. So this should lead to better segregation of waste and food waste going into the right bin, and hopefully we'll see then an awareness around the behaviours that have generated food waste, and hopefully ultimately then lead to food waste prevention. We have heard today about the launch of the revised food waste charter, which happened at the end of June this year, and there has been food donation and redistribution activities, and we've seen the good work that's been carried out, and it's ongoing for a number of years now. For example, by Food Cloud, but there's also other activities in this space, such as the work being carried out by Olio and Too Good to Go. Our own Department of the Environment, Climate and Communication has had engagement with the Retail Forum as well in relation to the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap. We have Stop Food Waste Communications during the year, in particular on the 1st of March. And also in relation to the segregation piece as well, we've had a National Food Waste Recycling Week, which is led by the Regional Waste Management Planning Offices. That was carried out for a second year this year in June. and the Department of the Environment has been funding the regions in terms of campaigns such as rolling out provision of food waste caddies through the mywaste.ie campaigns to householders to facilitate better food waste segregation. Sorry, just move the slide on. And also in research and innovation, the Rural Innovation and Development Fund, we've seen that earlier this year, an initiative led by Food Cloud called the Growers Project, which is aimed at reducing food waste at farm level by connecting growers that have surplus produce with the community groups located around the country. We've also had a publication of a draft Green Public Procurement Strategy and Action Plan for public consultation, and that does include a sectoral focus, including on food waste as well, so it has proposed actions to tackle food waste. And also just to mention that that's still currently out for public consultation until the 17th of November, and you can see that on the gov.ie website. We've also had active participation, particularly from the EPA and our own department, in the work of the EU platform on food losses and food waste and associated subgroups. So this is an EU platform that was established in 2016 that brings together EU institutions, experts from EU countries and other international organisations. And it really sets out to define measures to prevent food waste, but also to share best practice and evaluate progress made over time. And they've established a number of subgroups looking at specific themes such as action and implementation, date marking, food donation, food loss and waste monitoring, and also consumer food waste prevention. And also today, the Forum on Food Waste is also an action in the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap. So we are seeing good progress this year so far, in this first year of this first National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap. There'll always be ongoing work to be done, and there's other actions that will need focus and progress as well. And our own department looks forward to working with a range of key stakeholders to progress the delivery of the roadmap. And also just in the last slide there, just to give you a link to the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap if you want to see further information. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Brian. We're going to just go back to the ladies that we have online, and we'll bring Brian into this discussion as well. First of all, Ingrid, just, on the reporting burden, if you like, the amount of touch points you mentioned, the amount of data points that they have to supply information on, over 1,000 at one point, for companies to undertake this. Are companies, when they communicate with you and talk about reporting and this coming towards us, are they worried about that reporting burden?
And yes, they are worried, but we need to keep it really, really real. I mean, the EU has given us a roadmap to actually eliminate greenwashing. For me, I feel that it comes back on 20 years of maybe too much greenwashing in marketing and not having the data to sit behind stories. Now, bring it back to the companies who have to comply with CSRD and the companies who don't. Ultimately, we're all in this together. And if we just step back and see what is applicable to us, we actually can start with as I said, the voluntary sustainable reporting, which is only 42 disclosures for every SME that is easy to do. If we're only focusing on waste, there's 3 data points, 3. And let's start there. Just starting to look at what's my source, what's my specification, who can I talk to? Again, for me, the first thing for everybody to do is go and talk with your customer, go and talk with your supplier. What are they currently doing? We're all in this together. But really, if you want one point to start with, it's start with your own specification of your product that you either buy or sell, and see if you can buy less or actually design out the waste, right? And this goes right back to what Brian said, the circular economy. It's a circular thinking we need to apply to waste has a value throughout the supply chain and towards our customers. So once if we can prevent waste, that's the best thing to do. If we can reduce it, that's the second best. Can we reuse it? That's another way of thinking. Can we recycle? Can we repurpose? The last thing we should do is have waste at the end of the cycle, because that means that we need to dispose of it, and therefore we are throwing value away. So first things first, if you can look at the specification of what your product is made out of, and do that, apply the circular principles. If it's a value or if it's not a value, is there a cost? Is there not a cost? And then see, well, can we look at making out of waste a value stream, or can we replace it with something that is valuable? So really back down to what the companies are really good at. Food companies especially, look at your specifications, start with that, and then put out in your tenders towards your suppliers or your customers what you want it to be. Like Brian said, in the public sector, green public procurement is specifying criterias of what companies now will have to comply with. We can do that in the private sector too, and it can be that collaborative approach. It doesn't have to be on your own. Start talking, start collaborating with your really valuable suppliers and your customers.
Okay, thank you. Good points. Sirje, in Finland, what is the size of the scale of companies that right now are required to do the mandatory reporting? Is it only very big, if you like, multinationals, or very big meat plants, or very big factory situations?
Yeah, we have environmental protection law, which has some companies they have to have environmental permit. So those are, though in Finland we have no so many international big companies. So but in Finland we have some. How I say it is, many food factories, like we have chocolate factories, yes, and so on. So they have, when you have environmental
regulation.
Yeah, we have environmental regulation, and big food factories, they have to report all the wastes, and then also the food waste.
Okay.
They are generated, but not restaurants, cafes and shops and little operators.
Okay. And is it planned that restaurants and cafes and shops will have to report food waste in Finland as well? And when might that happen?
No, because the politicians are not they don't want that, because there are so many restaurants and cafes and so on. But I think it's now better when they have to keep the record. Mm-hmm. Then it's easier also to report, but we are not supervising very, very strongly now this record keeping. I think we are just saying now, because this is a new law. So now we are saying only that you have to keep the record, and we have some information for you how to do it, mm-hmm, and so on. And we are not punishing them if they are not doing that now, but maybe after few years also we have stricter orders for that.
Yes. I can see that system makes sense, because if you get people into the habit of recording their food waste, at least they are taking some kind of action. Brian, in terms of our situation here, I know we're only a year into the roadmap, but I noticed that one of the points on it earlier was we don't have baseline figures for food waste yet. We haven't decided what that is. Is that going to happen quickly? Because unless we have the baseline, we can't really work out targets.
Well, no, we do have figures.
Okay.
We have official figures. The first EU figures for Ireland was submitted in last year for 2020. So this year is for reference year 2021. We expect the baseline year to be 2020. When I say we haven't established a baseline in terms of what is going to be the baseline linked to the EU targets.
Okay,
so
okay.
The current EU proposal is for the 2020 to the first EU-wide monitoring levels of food waste, which is the 2020 data set. So we expect it could be 2020. Now there is flexibility in terms of looking at that baseline year in the proposal, but we expect it will be 2020, but it's not official yet.
We're quite behind, though, a lot of Europe and a lot of other nations. Do we have a lot of catching up to do?
I wouldn't say that now, to be honest with you. I think there has been a lot of work done, particularly through the National Food Waste Prevention Programme, that the EPA has been working on for the last number of years, through the Stop Food Waste, i.e. the Food Waste Charter. The original charter was launched a number of years ago, and it was revised this year. So there has been a lot of work. And that's what the roadmap is trying to do, is bring in all these actions in a coherent manner. In a way, but it's there's still a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong, but if we have this in a I suppose a coherent direction of travel, and for example, trying to encourage food business sectors to sign up to the Food Waste Charter, for example, we will definitely make improvements. And it's all about data as well in terms of measuring and understanding where the issues lie, so we can then formulate actions to reduce food waste.
Yeah, and also green public procurement. I know in the food world there's an awful lot of people very interested in that, to see that the state provides leadership, for state agencies that buy food, for HSE, for any canteens, any organisations that those sort of organisations can provide a blueprint for others.
Yeah, so a big focus is now on preparing a new green public procurement strategy and action plan. The current policy is known as green tenders, and that was published in 2012. A lot of water has gone on the bridge since then in terms of procurement policy, climate policy, energy policy, circular economy. So this is a new strategy that we're working on at the moment, and as I said, it's currently out for public consultation. But as you say, the public sector has a very important role, considering their purchasing power, to stimulate the marketplace, to provide more resource efficient goods and services. And food waste is one area that we should be looking at. For example, looking at any contracts to include criteria that companies, for example, that provide food and catering services, include specific measures to tackle food waste prevention. Or tackle food waste, including prevention and segregation, as part of their service provision.
Ingrid, are you seeing from companies more activity in terms of taking actions, not just talking about food waste, but actually doing practical, I suppose stuff that we've been talking about all day, doing the measuring, implementing systems, getting to grips with their staffing, and getting people to take the measures required to actually reduce food waste?
That's a very good question, Suzanne, and it's a broad question, because you're touching on the resources, the people who have to do it, and making them aware of what good looks like. So understanding where they currently at, what they need to do, and then make sure that the appropriate training is in there. And on the other hand, it's about the data and systems, and how can we make it easy for companies to actually collect data that is relevant and that is important. So it's to understand what is important to my business, where do I have a gap. What we do see, and again, it's I want to see it more, but what we hear a lot already is that, and not only for food waste, but across actual sustainability, is that it is now landing into the tenders. I come from the procurement and supply chain background as well in the private and the public sector, and I'm actually happy to see that the buyers are now actually explicit, telling the suppliers what is important to them from a sustainable point of view. So if we bring it back to waste and food waste, it's what we need to do. We need to call out what the expectation is from our suppliers, how we're going to monitor them, and what the KPIs are. And that aligns again with what the EU wants. It's providing full transparency throughout the supply chain, and it's going to be a journey. It's not going to be here tomorrow, but we need to start. And so getting to grips with, in our tenders, what we're going to pay money for, from a waste prevention, waste data collection, monitoring it, or turning it into a value again, to then effectively measuring and improving and reducing our waste in line with the targets, with our own national targets, but also the EU targets and the global targets, because ultimately, you know, we have a planetary boundary that we need to stay within. We cannot keep on consuming the way we have been. And therefore, we all need to look at what can we do in our own organization with our supply chain to start cutting out the waste.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a broad question and such a broad challenge. But we have a question in there, Sirje, in regard to Finland, and it's something I'd like to know as well. Was passing that legislation about the mandatory reporting, was there a lot of resistance? Was there a lot of negative commentary? Or how did people view it in general?
No, this mandatory reporting for the big food industry, that was quite ordinary in Finland.
Right.
So it wasn't very negative commenting or something like that. That was easy, I think. But I think if we do it for the little ones,
yes,
so it's more difficult, because this pandemic also, the restaurants and cafes have so suffered from pandemic so much. So I think the politicians don't want to have any burden for them.
Put more pressure on them. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Sirje, we've one last question there in for you. When measuring food waste, is the food waste content of general and recycling streams included?
Yes. That's so we have the EU. The food waste is the same as in waste legislation in EU. So waste directive, the whole food waste.
Yes. Okay. We're going to have to leave it there, I think. We have had a great third session. Brilliant to hear the EU situation from you, Ingrid, and Finland's situation is fascinating. And I think, you know, as you're saying, with large companies, the attitude is probably different because they're probably doing so much measuring and so many audits as it is, that it's easy for them to report their food waste. It's doing that in a smaller, more local context, and individual, very small businesses is a further step. But it's wonderful to hear what's happening with the food waste roadmap and with the public procurement consultation. That's obviously still live, you were saying?
It is indeed, yes. So that closes on the 17th of November. So welcome.
To contribute on that. People can get involved and contribute on that. And also, I'd just like to say huge thanks to all our speakers earlier in the two sessions, both from food businesses and also from the state agencies. And also, just when this transmission ends, you'll get a survey, an evaluation survey about the event. So please do fill it out. Let us know what worked or what didn't work, and we'll try to do better. And just thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, for being part of it. You know, if you're tuning in and you're listening to these conversations, you are already taking action and you're already, you know, a part of the change. and it's up to all of us to be part of the change. So thank you. On behalf of the EPA, I'd like to again thank all our speakers, everybody who took part today. So thank you and goodbye.